Well, we are continuing our series, Sharing My Story. We are on session three, so thank you all so much for either being here, joining us online, or joining us out in Bay Minette. I want to share a quote with you. We kind of ended with this idea in our last session, but I want to share it with you here, which is this. When you are curious, you are no longer in the role of expert. When you're curious, you're no longer in the role of expert. One of the things that intrigues me about this idea is there is I guess I'll just throw it out there. There's a Danish existentialist philosopher named Søren Kierkegaard. Those of you who've seen the movie Wayne's World will be familiar with Kierkegaard's work. Also, there's a really great follow on Twitter called Kim Kardashian Kierkegaard that takes Kim Kardashian quotes and mashes them up with Søren Kierkegaard quotes. It's pretty entertaining. Okay. So what Kierkegaard said, though, in his famous book on Abraham, it's called Fear and Trembling is the name of the book, and he talks about this idea within this concept of fear and trembling. He talks about the difference between being a witness and being a teacher. Being a witness and being a teacher. Now, I was intrigued by that because obviously we have the pastoral gift of being a teacher. We have the church role, the church spiritual gift of being a teacher. But his view on this idea was that when it comes to faith, perhaps we should take the posture of simply being a witness rather than the need to be a teacher. Because if you think about what does a teacher do? A teacher instructs, right? For example, I'm a teacher, I'm up here, you all are down there. There's a barrier between the teacher and the student. But when I'm a witness, now all I'm doing is sharing what I believe or what I've seen. See, a teacher teaches, a witness shares, gives testimony. And along the same lines with this quote, when you are curious, you are no longer in the role of expert. And one of the biggest challenges to sharing our story is the need to be an expert. It's one of the reasons many people don't ever share faith with anybody because they are so afraid of getting one of the big questions. Now, in a couple of weeks, we'll talk about the big questions, right? The big questions of if God is good, why is there evil in the world? Would a loving God send people to hell? Like, we're going to talk about those questions in the next couple of weeks. But most of the time when you get a question, we all just kind of freeze and we're like, well, I don't want to talk about Jesus because what if I give them a question or they give me a question and I give them an answer and they wind up converting to like Zoroastrianism because I got the answer wrong. Like, I'm so worried. So I just won't do anything, right? If I don't do anything. So what this class and these sessions are an attempt to do is to give all of us more confidence away from being teachers, to use Kierkegaard's framework, and more about how can we be witnesses. How can we bear testimony? And testimony to really one thing, what Jesus has done in my life. So we talked about these tools that help us change the world. The idea that we shared in the last session was Archimedes, the primordial engineer, talked about he said this, if you give me a lever and a fulcrum, I can move the world. The idea of simple tools are what we use to accomplish great things, okay? So what we talked about last week was the first of these three great tools that we could use. So before we get into that, let's go over some of this material because I know some of you, I haven't given you the blank yet, and you're starting to get really nervous. And I don't want to lose you for the rest of the night. So let's deal with the first blank, which is this. Our critical question for tonight is, am I ready to hear someone else's story? See, that's a little bit in opposition, maybe juxtaposition of our previous question, which is, am I ready to share my story? But what we're going to discover that sharing my story is as critical, and maybe even this next question is more critical, am I ready to hear someone else's story? Because that's what sharing is. Now, I know we all have to be reminded of what sharing is. But sharing is an exchange. I'm going to give and receive. And part of sharing our stories, part of sharing faith is receiving someone else's story. Okay? So our big idea for last week and then again for tonight is this, Jesus has given us the tools to move the world. Jesus has given us the tools. We talked about the 3 last week, and so we'll go this week. And if you don't know what those are, you can always go back, watch last week's session online. If you're signed up for the class, you also get the email with all the notes in them as well. I do want to remind you also, this isn't supposed to be in the teaching video, sorry. But don't forget to sign in. Everybody, please let me know you're here, because I've been taking attendance, because I've been obeying the rules. All right. So now I know if you're not here. All right. So we talked about those last week, and we ended with this idea of awareness. Remember, we talked about listening. We talked about just being aware. We talked about the tool of prayer. So this week, I want to talk about this first tool, which is this. It's actually tool number 4, but it's this. It's asking. It's asking. Learning to just ask questions. Now, some of you may have a heart full of questions, like, what are we going to eat later? Is he almost done? These are often critical questions that come out on a theology class. But I'm talking about asking deep questions. Proverbs 18:15 says this, the heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. We are often, how do I want to say this? There is, how do I want to say this? I'll just say it. There's a lie that says that we should just shut up and believe. Right? Right? Remember, there's a very famous bumper sticker. It said, God said it, I believe it, that's enough. And so sometimes people would say, well, that actually shouldn't be it. It should just be say, God said it, it actually should be God said it, that's enough. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. But that's neither here nor there. So some of us grew up, and the Sunday school teacher would say, statement, And some of us would raise our hand. And the Sunday school teacher would say, does anyone have a question? Does anyone other than Brian have a question? Anyone, please, anyone. And so for some of us, the way we grew up is that the question meant that there was doubt, and doubt meant that you were backsliding or you were in sin or something like that. But if you actually read the Proverbs talk about the importance of securing wisdom, of seeking wisdom. And they talk about wisdom in ways that make it something to be found. Well, the greatest tool in acquiring wisdom is the question. And questioning things isn't always a sign that you don't believe it. In fact, I read a book once that was talking about the conflict that was in Thomas. And this particular author in the, doubting Thomas, and this particular author said, what if Thomas doubted so much because he cared so much and he just couldn't bear it to not be true? Sometimes the questions come from a place of passion. I deeply care about these things, so I want to know more. And that's kind of my personality, but we have to ask. And when we talk about people learning the power of just asking great questions, learning the power, we talked a little bit about this last week, of being curious. And curiosity is the art of seeking to know someone else, seeking the knowledge of someone else, getting curious about other people's lives. Now, this is very important because some of you are thinking, man, I'm super curious. I always want to know what everybody's up to. That's not being curious, that's being nosy. And there's a difference. I'm not trying to look at anybody specific right now. There's a difference between being curious and being nosy. Curious is I want to know about you. Nosy is I need to know something, right? Nosy is this is going to be something for me. Curious is this is going to be something for you. And people are like, well, hold on. I always want to know what's up. Yeah, that's just being nosy. That's just being a busybody, and that's between you and Jesus. I'm talking about being curious, seeking to know someone else. Curiosity to me is, and I've touched on this a couple of times in these sessions, to me curiosity is, I'll just put it this way, I thank God he made me curious, because I think curiosity is the cure for outrage, in my opinion. Like, we got a lot of outrage. I can't believe you did this. Curiosity says, why would you do that? Outrage says, I can't believe you're that type of person. Curiosity says, tell me your story. Curiosity and asking questions elevates the value of the other person. I want to know who you are. Because I'm going to tell you something about discipleship. Remember, all evangelism is discipleship, and all discipleship is evangelism. I'll tell you something about discipleship. Discipleship without context, discipleship without relationship, just becomes cloning, where I'm just trying to turn you into another version of me. And the last thing this world needs is more me. Discipleship is I want to plant the seed of faith in your life, not take the big tree of my faith and just dump it in the front yard of your life. So if I'm not curious, I don't know things about you, how you grew up, where you're from, what were your parents like? Did you even know your parents? What was your education like? Where did you move? So it becomes this way that we can have context. And to me, the context is everything, right? I talk about this when I teach the Bible. Any text without a context is a con. Context is king. I would much rather know why you made a decision. For me personally, this may not be true of you, but for me, I find it beneficial to know why you made a decision than to really think about the decision itself sometimes. Because if I can get to the why, that's when we change things. That's when real worldview transformation happens. So how do I develop a curious nature? How can I develop a curious nature? Number one, curiosity is intrigued. I love using words like that, mostly because they're not words we use a lot, and now you've used it this year. Congratulations. I want all of you to stop and think, when was the last time I used the word intrigued? Like, that smell from my son's room. Intriguing. I have a whole list of words, but I'm not going to give you all the words, all right? Curiosity is intrigue. Curiosity simply looks at a situation and goes, I wonder what's going on there. Before anything else, just to say, what's the next level? I see something in front of me, but maybe, just maybe, there's more going on. That's curiosity. It's not doubt. It's not fear. It's not disloyalty. It's not letting the devil get into your head. It's just saying, hey, maybe there's more going on. Curiosity learns. We don't really learn unless we're curious. We don't. And the reason we have things is because we're curious. I mean, that's just the truth. I get this a lot. I'm kind of, I don't mind admitting that I'm kind of a nerd and a geek, and I'm an intellectual. I don't mind admitting that I'm okay with a life of the mind, all that kind of stuff. And then people always say, well, man, why are you're up there in the clouds, and why don't you, think about what's going on in the here and now? And I'm like, well, the people that live in the clouds are the ones that give you everything you live in the here and now, right? Like, we don't get this unless somebody just sat in a room thinking stuff up, right? We don't get anything. So there's this way where we learn, we grow. But the other thing is that curiosity cares. Nosy doesn't care. You wonder if the difference, okay, am I nosy or am I curious? Dear Lord, speak to me now. It's simple. Do you actually care about the situation you're inquiring about? Because if you don't care, you're being nosy. And you may be curious, realize you don't care, and then back off. I don't know. You may get nosy and realize, no, I really do care, and then you can transition to becoming curious. But curiosity cares. I want to know about this person that God has put in my existence. I just want to know more about them. Not so I can just know the tea or get the dirt or whatever, but so I can be a part of what God is doing in their life. And then curiosity is humble. The thing about curiosity is it seeks to know someone else, but curiosity also admits that I don't know everything. I don't know everything. And when you combine humility and curiosity, you get, honestly, someone that's a lot of fun to be around because you wind up getting to share things. I really do love to talk. Sometimes I get kind of hyper and I just keep talking. And I won't shut up. I have, over the years, created what is called, in my world, a spaz cap. And if I'm not careful, the spaz cap opens. And then I just say crazy stuff. So I've worked very hard over the years keeping the spaz cap down. But you get enough Red Bull and enough Ritalin and enough coffee and not enough food, and the spaz cap comes off, and I don't shut up. That's not a good thing. Like, I love to hear this. I love to be right. But what I've learned over the years is to look at somebody and say, tell me. I want to learn. And I'm not saying you need to be curious like me. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is becoming a curious person has changed and blessed my life. And it's enriched my relationships. And I know stuff that I would never know if I thought I knew it all. Okay? So curiosity is humble. So you're like, okay, well, this is all theoretical, but I'm ready for some practical stuff. All right? All my practical people out there, all my get-it-done people, this next one's for you, okay? Building a curious conversation. Maybe you literally don't even know how to be curious. I have no idea how to be curious, okay? First off, history. Our first category is history, right? Is history. Where are you from? That's a great question to ask somebody. Look, literally, if you're getting to know someone, it's a simple question. Where are you from? Right? People ask me that all the time. Hey, where are you from? And I say, well, I'm from Arkansas, but I was born in Nebraska. Well, now we've got a story. There's a reason that I was born one place, but I say I'm raised from another place. And in that, you can actually learn quite a bit about me. Where are you from? Okay? Transitions, right? The transitions of life. Where are you now? Where are you now? What's going on in your life right now? Well, I used to work here, now I work here. People say, well, what are you doing now? I work at a church in Alabama. And everyone who knows me are like, really? I thought you were in Seattle. I was. Now we have a story. I once was here, now I'm here. I once was lost, now I'm found, right? I just really like it here. Okay? Principles. How did you get here? In other words, what guided your life to this point? Those principal moments in your life. And you say, well, I ask people that. Great. But if you really don't know how to have a conversation with somebody, it's just a great place to start. Like the new person at work. Your new neighbor. It could be anybody. The new person that's been brought into your family through relationship. And then goals. Where are you going? You don't look at someone and say, okay, I need to know your life goals right now. Because then they'll say, that dude was weird, and I'm never going over there again. But just becoming curious. What am I really asking you? If you think about it, what I'm asking you to do is to learn to read and study the story of people's lives. Because one thing we'll talk about in the next couple weeks is that the story is always more important than the history. And what I mean by that is the story is always more important than the truth. Okay? Because the story is what they believe about themselves. The story is what got them here. We all build narratives on our lives. In fact, learning your own narrative helps you tell your story better. How would you answer these questions? Right? Someone said, where are you from? And you say, I'm from here. Okay. That's actually pretty impressive that anyone's still in the same city they were born in anymore. There's a story there, okay? All right, why is this important? Because good questions build connection. If you say, well, this isn't important, or this seems like a little whatever, go back and pay attention to the gospel. This is one of those things where I always just encourage people, just go back and pay attention to Jesus, and look at how many questions Jesus really asked. Jesus, who in fact knew everything. This is important. He's the only real know-it-all. He literally knew everything, and yet he asks great questions. Mark 10, chapter 10, verse 51, when he's talking to a man who had been blind, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked him. The blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. You know what I love about that verse is that Jesus doesn't assume something, right? Jesus doesn't look at this blind guy's life and says, look, it's obvious what you want. Jesus says, what do you want? What can I do for you? He doesn't assume something based on all these external factors. One question starts a journey. And there's a lot of people that we do that with, don't we? We look at their external factors, how they're dressed, who they're with, what they're driving, where they live, what part of town they live in, the name of the name of the subdivision they live in, or the name of the apartment complex they live in, like all this kind of stuff, and we assume, I know what it is you need. And once we've done that, we're no longer curious. We're an expert on this person that we've actually never met. And that's what we do. I know what they're like, or even worse, I know how those people think. I know what that type of person's like. No, you really don't. So I just stop and I say, give me a question. What is it, Jesus says, that you need? Now the man says, I want to see, but Jesus didn't assume it. Okay? So how can I build connections with great questions? First off, be genuinely interested in people, by the way. Don't be like, okay, so my pastor gave me this assignment to be curious. We had this class. In fact, the professor who taught it has spoken here, and we got a great relationship here. It was called Personal Evangelism with Dr. David Watson was the teacher's name. And the one thing about this class is that it was on evangelism, but you had to actually witness for a grade, which that's a little weird. But some of us are procrastinators. So the night before the witnessing assignment was due, I'd be in my room going, I got to witness to somebody, but I'm in Bible college. So there was this gas station across the street from our school. And I'll tell you what, that gas station, the single most evangelized spot on the planet. Because those poor gas station attendants were witnessed to every night for weeks. Hey, how are you doing? Do you have a God-shaped hole in your heart? Can I introduce you to my best friend? His name is Jesus. Let me tell you the Romans road. We would go in and we'd do our bit, and the guy would be like, yeah, no, you're right. Whoa, yeah. Can we get to I know it's coming. Can we get to the prayer part? We need to move. Right? It felt like homework. I don't want you to have homework. I want you to realize that God has put people in my life, and if they're in my life, that means that God is asking me to care about them. That's the reason they're there. Some of you wonder, why is this person in my life? Maybe that's the prayer. We talked about prayer last week. Maybe that's the prayer you start with. But we become genuine interest and curiosity. Ask open-ended questions, right? Did you enjoy church? No. Oh. What didn't you like about it? See, that's an open-ended question, right? Concise. I want to talk about this because we're going to get into this a little bit. When I talk about being concise, I really mean don't take over. We're going to talk about this in a little bit on another point, but we talked about this last week also. Avoid the temptation of being profound and taking over. What do you think about God? And then shut up. How do you feel about religion? And then stop. Okay? Connected, contextual, and then safe. If you're going to ask questions, be safe. Don't ask questions if you're not ready for the answers. Well, I don't believe in God. Well, I guess you're going to hell then. That's not, you see, well, how are they ever going to talk to you again? So the power, the tool of asking good questions. The next one is this, the power and the tool of being a loving person. Of being a loving person. I want to stop here because I talk about love and people get nervous. They're like, oh, you mean soft. No, that's not what I said. If I wanted to say soft, I'd say soft. I'm talking about being loving. And loving is the most brave thing and the courageous thing you can do in the universe, is to love someone. There's nothing soft about love. There's not. It is literally the most courageous thing. Because love is a commitment to pursue the welfare of another. It's not an emotion. It can be, but for the most part, it is a decision to pursue the welfare of another person, to want the best for someone else. And in a universe that's designed to elevate the soul survivor, the strongest, for God to step in and say, our ethic is that the other one wins before we do. That's the most courageous thing you can do in the universe. Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 through 39 says, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. I want to stop there for a second because I want to tell you what's going on. These are two different passages of the Old Testament. They're not even in the same book. Okay? One comes from the book of Numbers. That's the second one. The other one comes from the book of Deuteronomy. Now, the one from the book of Deuteronomy is the love of your Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That is tied to, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. So this is the ultimate confession of Jewish ethics. It's the most important thing you do. There's only one God, so he gets everything. Then Jesus immediately says, and the other is like it. So Jesus takes the command to love your neighbor and elevates it and like binds it together with the command to love God. What he's saying is you cannot do one without doing the other. So if I don't, this is how important it is. John in 1 John actually says, if you say you love God and hate your brother, you don't actually love God. You don't know God, he says, because God is love. So whatever I know about love is actually a window to God. But think about that. So loving is important, but loving your neighbor is the interesting one. Because some of you are thinking, I get along with my neighbor. He still has my lawnmower, and I'm letting that go. And then so we think of the story of the Good Samaritan, right? Because part of us, the legal part of us, the legalistic part of us, or the part of us that kind of wants to get out of it, asks this question, well then, who is my neighbor? I mean, come on, who do I really have to love? You say love your neighbor as yourself, but come on, you don't really mean that guy, do you? Have you met my neighbor? So when Jesus talks about loving your neighbor, what is he talking about? And it's this statement. I don't think this is in your notes, but I want to have this statement. Loving is treating those outside your group as you treat those inside your group. To love your neighbor as yourself literally means, in its most intrinsic form, it means this. Love the outsider as an insider. Love the other as you. And when I do that, I realize there aren't outsiders. Okay? Now that's tough for us because all the world wants to do is keep us in our categories. I'm a Republican and I'm a Democrat. And those are categories. And Jesus even says it's actually very easy to love people like you. Real love is loving people who aren't one of you. Whether it's gender, race, politics, economics, religion, whatever it is, to sit there and say, you're not one of me, but I'm going to love you as one of me. Because you know what? There's been studies, like even in the 60s, it's called the in-out bias, which means this. If you're like me, I'm more likely to do business with you. I'm more likely to be more gracious to you. I'm more likely to be more friendly to you. Whatever category we share, I'm more likely. But if you're not like me, I'm less likely to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm less likely to trust you. I'm less likely to give you money for business. I'm less likely to do all these things. Jesus simply says this. Whatever you're willing to do for someone who's like you, do it for someone who's not like you. And in my opinion, that's going to change the world. So what is love? Love is this. Number one, love is relentless. 1 John 4, 9 and 10. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us. So right there is the inherent nature of love. Love is taking the first step without any guarantee of return. That's why it's so courageous. We make love very transactional, right? I'll love you if you love me. I'll respect you if you respect me. I'll honor you if you honor me. I'll talk nice about you if you talk nice about me. And we do all this kind of stuff, but none of that's love. That's the easy part. Jesus himself says, no, love is when someone talks trash about you and you choose to love and you honor them. Pray for those who persecute you, he says. Bless those who despitefully use you. You're like, well, Brian, that's like the New Testament. I'm not even getting into Old Testament stuff. And this is the thing. This is when we have to say, do I really follow Jesus? And that's a whole other lesson. All right. It is sacrificial. It is sacrificial. God demonstrates his own love for us, and this while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. The thing about loving your neighbor as yourself means letting go of the need that love be returned. It costs us something. It does. You may say, well, I'm not ready. I'm not saying you're going to have to lay down your life for your neighbor. I'm just saying you may have to lay down something that you think is yours that you have a right to. Like your outrage or your anger. I have a right to be mad. You do, but Jesus also says we sacrifice for our neighbor. Inviting. Love your neighbor as yourself. You're doing right. What does that mean? If you really keep the royal law found in Scripture, James chapter 2, you are doing right. Love invites. Love includes. Love doesn't exclude. Right? Now, love doesn't just say, when I say love includes and I say love invites, I think somebody could misinterpret that and say, oh, then that, there's no consequence for sin or that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying love is an intentional decision to continue to invite. That person's decision to accept the invitation bears no impact, hopefully, on my decision to invite them. Okay? Because that's what Jesus did for us. God never stops inviting us. Okay? And then it is compassionate. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Paul then says in Galatians, how can I fulfill that law of loving my neighbor as myself? It's to carry each other's burdens. Emotional burdens, financial burdens, whatever it is. And how do I live this out? There's a few ways, and we'll get to that in the notes. For example, listen more than you speak. This is a tough one for me, right? But as it's been said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Just do the math. Use sensitive and kind words. Some of you are like rolling. The eyes of your heart are rolling right now. I get it. Sensitive and kind words. That sounds weak. No, it's actually easy to be mean. It really is. It's easy to be harsh. You know why? Because it's instinctual. Think about that. It's instinctual. The baseline response to any threat to us is to match and attack back. But Jesus says, no, I'm calling you to a higher ethic. So for some of us, compassionate and kind words. I'm telling you this one, when it comes to be compassionate, avoid theology at all costs. This is what I tell people all the time. People say, oh, I have this really hard question. I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. I can give you a theologically accurate answer, or I can give you an emotionally satisfying answer. But the two are rarely the same. Well, I need to know. I'm like, I don't know. I just want you to know God cares. God gets what you're going through. Why did this happen? I don't know why this happened. And for whatever you do, please avoid theologically inaccurate answers. Whoa, Lord, and don't, just because it makes you feel better or sounds good, well, I guess they needed another angel in heaven. That's just not a true statement. And I don't mean that uncompassionately now. Like I feel bad saying that as a point of compassion now, because sometimes we say things like that. But that's not true, because what you just told them is that God would rather have you miserable. That's not true. So just say, I don't understand this either, but this is what I know. God is with us in everything we face. Let's talk about that. Show up. Just show up for people in times of compassion. Just be there. You don't have to say anything. Just be there. And always, 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 in whatever you do, just point back to Jesus. And that last one is really the heart of it all. In sharing your story with people, what am I actually doing? I'm always pointing back to Jesus. Because if I point back to Jesus, I don't have to be the hero in your tragedy. Jesus can be. See, if I point back to Jesus, I'm not your Savior. He is. And if I'm pointing to Jesus, you're not rejecting me, you're rejecting him, and he already told me that would happen, so I'm not surprised. What I mean is to point back to Jesus. I don't know, but this is what I know about Jesus. I don't understand this, but this is what Jesus has done in my life. I don't know what it's like to go through what you're going through, but I know about Jesus. And always point back to Jesus in a loving way. So we talk about asking, we talk about loving, and then we talk about welcoming. We talk about welcoming. The power of welcoming people into your life. Okay. Statistically, about 80 to 90% of you just got really, really nervous. Because that's how many introverts there are in the world. It's not 50-50. There are more of us than them. We just don't unite because we just want to be left alone. The extroverts are all united, and they're all like, whoa, let's have a party. And the introverts are like, well, I don't know. I just got a new book. Along with the other 400 I haven't read, but it's a new book. But I'm going to tell you something. Welcoming is a spiritual act. Welcoming people is an act of worship. You're like, man, I can tell the stress level in some of you. You're like, does this mean I have to welcome people into my home? Not if your home's gross. Please don't do that. But what I'm saying is welcome people into your life. Love is patient, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. What do I mean by that? Why that verse? Because that's showing this is how I bring people into my life, by loving them. Do you see the connection? I ask, I respond in love, and now I can say, I'm going to allow you into my life. Welcoming is the art of allowing people into your life. And I want us to struggle with that just for a second. And this could be one of those things that they tell communicators and teachers not to do, which is to personalize the content about yourself, but I'm straight up making this about myself. I don't want any more people in my life. I like the people in my life. I've got great people in my life. I really don't need any more. The problem is I bowed my knee to Christ, and I said, you're Lord and I'm not. So it doesn't matter what I want. I have to do what he says. And he says, open your heart to people. See the unseen. Love the unlovable. Welcome people into your life. So I do. I'm not always great at it. I'll be honest with you. I'm one of the world's worst friends. Ask any of my friends. Oh, I texted Brian the other day. How long ago? About 5 months, and he texted me back. It was really great. It just said thanks with a period. Like, that's how bad. I didn't even know you weren't supposed to put the period on the end of text back to people. I thought it was good grammar. I was told by another generation it's incredibly rude to put a period on the end of something. Thanks. Emoji. That's what I do now. But here's what I do know. God has said, Jesus Christ, the one who I said, you're in charge and I'm not, and I will do everything you tell me to do, said, love your neighbor as yourself. And here's the thing about your neighbor. It's other people. Okay? Welcoming is the art of allowing people into your life. So the question you have to ask is my life welcoming? And you're like, I don't know. I'm not talking about your house anymore. Okay? I'm talking about, is my mind welcome to people? Kind of goes back to being curious. Is my heart welcome to other people? And again, let's talk about the other people that Jesus wants us to welcome. Our neighbor, the other. Think about the implications of this before you say, that's good, Pastor, or amen, or whatever we often do sometimes because something sounds right. This is seismic in the way we interact with each other. Because this means I am emotionally going to let Jesus speak to me about somebody that 20 minutes ago I may have despised because of who they were and what they stood for. This is why Christianity changed the world, because they just didn't want to keep hanging out with each other. And here's how tough they had to do it. God in Acts had to send persecution to get them to leave each other. Because human nature is to just stay in our circle and with people who look and act like us? Is my mind and my heart truly open to others? And from time to time, maybe my home. Is your home open? Now, if you ever wonder, does Brian really live out everything he preaches? Absolutely not on this one. Yeah, I'm just going to be honest with you, okay? I'm not trying to, I told our interns the other day, most of my teaching, it's not always literal. Sometimes it's aspirational, and this is aspirational for me. But what I mean by that is for many of us, our home is our sanctuary. It's where it's our final, it's that final fortress away from people. And I don't say this because, it's a good idea or it's being friendly. I'm saying this as Christians because it's what we are called to do. We're commanded to do this, so we have to discover a way to do it. So what are the barriers to a welcoming life? What are some of the barriers to a welcoming life? Hurry. Hurry's one of the biggest one. Ain't nobody got time for that. Right? I don't have time. I have people. I got stuff to do. I got places to be, which is a subtle way of saying everything I have to do is more important than you as a human being. It kind of is, but you're like, no, I'm really busy. I understand. Busyness, so just figure that out. Prejudice. Some of us just simply don't like other groups of people. I mean, that's not shocking to anybody, is it? We're it's just out there. But here's the problem. If I'm following Jesus, I don't get this anymore. I'm just not allowed it. Well, you don't understand. You don't have I don't care. I mean, I kind of care because I'm compassionate, but I have to say, no, Jesus says you have to do it. Whatever the prejudice is, and there's the ones that are sort of, we know those. Yeah, but we know those. I'm talking about any kind of prejudice. I don't understand what, I don't understand. God could never save someone like that. Well, that's prejudice. You need to let it go right now. We need to actually repent of it because it's kind of a sin. There's no place for this. And the reason we don't advance as a kingdom is because of hurry. It's because of prejudice. It's because of outrage. We're so busy being mad, we're not curious anymore. And I'd rather be offended by you than be compassionate towards you. A flip switch somewhere. And we all just love outrage. I'm old enough to remember, and I am quite old. I'm old enough to remember when people that were chill and moderate. And when I don't mean politically, I just mean people that are reserved and chill. We're that person's really got a hold on their mouth and their life. There's someone to be admired. Now, it's just whoever the loudest wins. And whoever can whip up the most outrage wins. And so what happens is we see that as effective in the world, and we think it's effective in the church. But we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. The weapons of our warfare aren't carnal, Paul says. So we don't use the weapons of this world. And if one of the biggest, look at these are the weapons of this world. So they're not at the disposal of those who follow Jesus. You following me? Everybody okay? All right, let's move on to defensiveness, because that's what some of you are experiencing. Well, you're not talking, that was really meant to be a joke, right? Quit being defensive. I'm not being defensive. You're the one being defensive. He's obviously talking about somebody else. You know what defensiveness is? Defensiveness is the fear that you may be right. And I don't know how to deal with that. So I no longer have the truth, so I can't pound the truth. I no longer have the facts, so I can't hammer home the facts, so I'll just pound on the table, right? And I'll be defensive. Let it go. And then selfishness. I just simply don't want to. And again, none of these are the fruit of the Spirit. I hope we all see that, right? And so and again, guys, you have to hear this. I hope, dear Lord, please help me, that I'm not coming off as this smug, Brian. I'm going to tell you something. Some of these are things that I wrestle with. These are the reasons I sometimes don't share my faith. I have to make sure that it's not, I don't know that I want to, or if I have that gift. Those are not the questions. This is the command of Christ, and I either obey it or I don't. So my job then is to seek out, if I'm not doing it, why and how can I do it? These are not the suggestions. These are the commands of God. Go into all the world and make disciples. And if I'm letting one of these things rule my life, then I can't obey that command because of one of these things, then that means one of these things has to go, not the command. Right? All right, okay. How can I cultivate a welcoming life? This one's a little more fun. Here we go, hopefully. Or it could just be dumb, I don't know, but here we go. Right? My face, my space, my place, and my grace. Just try to make it a little more fun there. Is my face welcoming? And I know the answer to that question. No, Brian, it is not. I have what is affectionately known as resting Brian face. I constantly look perturbed, and here's why. I'm really just tired and a little confused. Most of my life, I just go between being tired and then when I'm awake, I'm really just confused. I walk around naturally with my mouth slightly open. And it's not that I'm bored, it's just that I'm not interested in anything you have to say, right? I have ADD. I'm like, I don't know. You're over here and you're like, oh, Pastor. I'm like, I don't know, dragons. Like, that's where my brain goes. So I have to be aware. This was so funny. I was like 20 plus years into ministry, and I'm in the lobby of our church in Washington. And they're like, Brian, you need to smile more when you're in the lobby. And I'm like, I'm not. And this young guy I love so much, his name's Vinny. He's like, no, Brian, you look really mad. And you know why? Because it was bright. And I wear glasses. So most of the time I was just standing on the edge of the lobby like this. And they're like, well, your smile. So what did I do? The Bible has a word for this. It's called your countenance. Does your countenance project that you're welcome to other people? You're like, man, Brian, you are going after it. Most of this lesson's about me. I'm just going to be honest with you. And I'm just projecting onto you guys. Am I approachable as a person? Am I sour? Does everyone know, oh man, for whatever you do, don't go talk to Ted. Ted's just too. Do the people in my life know that push really comes to shove, that whatever's going on here, the face of my heart is smiling and sees them with pride and pleasure and loves them? And I work on it here. I've practiced my smile over the years. I have one smile in every picture. That's the one. That's the only look I got. My space. Are the environments in my life a place where people are welcome? I actually really do work on this. I just, believe it or not, I actually completely restructured my office so people would feel welcome in there. I realized my office was very much like, you sit there, I sit here, and we're going to figure this out. So I just did because I wanted people to say, hey, I need to talk to Brian about something. I hope that's cool. And my personal space, which, but yeah, am I welcoming? My place, what I mean by that is it could be your home, it could just be your area of life. Your office, the coffee shop you frequent. Do you have a place where you can welcome people in? You're like, are you saying that practically? Yes. It could be that practical. Guys, this could be the excuse you've wanted to put that fire pit in your backyard. Because you can say, honey, Pastor Brian said, I need to have a place to welcome people. Yeah. So that when that friend from high school calls and said, man, I need to talk to you, my life's falling apart, you say the fire pit's going to be ready, be here in 20 minutes. Have I created? That's what I mean. Because here's the thing about being a Christian. We signed on to do this. And if we don't do it on purpose, we will never do it by accident. So I'm literally talking about a place, right? And then my grace. And what I mean by that, how you respond to other people's sin, their failure, their tragedy, their hardship. Are you, in fact, a graceful person? I'm not talking about how you dance. I'm talking about, are you full of grace? Or are you full of outrage? Are you full of anger? Are you full of hurt? Are you full of doubt? Are you full of suspicion? What are you full of? The Bible would say, be full of grace. That compassion towards somebody else, where you treat people as though they're a gift and not a burden. Now, All right, what are we looking at? Okay. Does anybody know Austrian Patrick Hall? Don't call him if you do. All right, okay. Man. I got to be honest with you guys. All-time first right there. You were here when that has never happened to me before. And honestly, how many of you thought it was like a tornado or a hurricane? All right? And like I said, I lived in Nebraska. I know that sound. And my stomach just went, oh man, we're going Dorothy mode right now. You better not be a witch because that house is coming for you. Dear Lord, please have whatever that situation is, we ask for your grace and your mercy in that situation as well. So is my life a place where people would feel welcome? Again, more than your home, and I think you guys understand that. More than your office, more than, but I'm saying is it built to welcome people in? Or you do need to ask yourself, is it built to hold people out? Because you know what? That's not a home, that's a fortress. Right? And God didn't call us, He's the fortress, He's the refuge. We welcome people in. And so, let's go ahead and pray, and then I'll give you time. That was a good signal to shut up. Here we go. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your grace and your mercy. Father, I hope that you would help us to obey your commands in these areas. And Father, maybe for some of us, that's how we need to think of them. These are commands that you've called us to obey. So Father, help us live that way in every way possible. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right, go ahead, enjoy your discussion time.